Thank you. Yeah, be good to talk about.
So can I ask you a question? I suppose we work a lot with construction firms who are already bidding and have been for some time, but they're maybe not happy with their win rate. It used to be kind of a 1 in 3, and it's dropped right off. What would you say to a firm in that situation? How can they approach this challenge that they've got and turn things around again?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question, that, because a lot of businesses establish the markets that they're going into and then don't tend to revisit them, and the businesses start to grow as well. So they actually outgrow the market that they're bidding in and become either too expensive, or cheaper people come into that market and they've got to move on. So it's about maturity of the market that they're in and the maturity of their business, and making sure that those two are consistent. I'll give you an example. When I was working for a main contractor, in the early days, we were doing some work with Tesco's, building their new concept stores, the big white stores. So they had the main contractors that were sort of right at the cutting edge of innovation, helping them design these stores and getting them up really, really fast. And we had a good run on those, and the work flowed really well and it was profitable. But then over a period of time, the subcontractors that were building these all started to understand how the things were being built.
Right,
And,
yes.
and the thing became almost like a mechanized process, which was great. But Tesco's then thought, well, we don't actually need these expensive main contractors that have got all the expertise of innovation and what have you to actually manage these jobs. They can be managed by someone else. So at that point, yes, there was a point when we were doing them routinely and they were a good cash generator. But eventually somebody else moved into that market and took over that work, and they became our they weren't profitable, so we moved away from those types of jobs. So I think there's a business model, the Boston consultancy matrix, that you're familiar with. Where you have your stars, the jobs that are coming up for the future, got future life in them, and they're generally quite profitable. Then they move to cash cows. They're making money, and you're good at them, but eventually either that market fades away or you've moved on from that market, so they become your dogs and you abandon those types of jobs. So that's one of the first things is to look at whether you're actually in a market that is ideally suited to your skills.
And it sounds like that's a constant cycle, that you can't just visit it once and then leave it. And how frequently would you say a firm, you really stay on top of things, should be looking at that in a strategic way?
I think it probably annually is a good time frame. If you look at it any more frequently than that, you don't really notice the changes. But if you do it annually, there's sufficient time frame to notice the changes. Another example would be the office market. Over time, if you think back, 20, 30 years, when there was the typing pools, so to speak, and then computers came in, so people started looking at putting in data into the offices. So there was a whole swathe of work then came in the offices. The next round was after personal computers came in and data. You had the old big workstations with the big screens, and everybody had the curved workstations. They then disappears with the advent of flat screens, and the office layouts became quite different. Then you had COVID, and everybody sort of thinks, oh, what's happening with the office period? And it sort of went into a bit of limbo. Now the office market is so busy with changing the office layout so it's friendly and people want to come into the office. That people a year ago might have been a bit reluctant to think about office fit out as a buoyant sector of the market. Now it's very buoyant, and there's people setting up special divisions in London to do the office fit out market that's there, either through downsizing or reconfiguring or whatever. So a yearly cycle of reviewing the actual market is important. Yeah.
And I suppose reviewing what's motivating you as a business, where you can innovate most, where you can add most value. And I suppose an internal consideration and an external one annually should really put you in a strong position to make the right decisions, shouldn't
It
it?
should. Yeah, it
Yeah.
should do.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
That's
Okay. And
and the
sorry, go on, Peter.
sorry. The other thing with win rate is then price.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because price obviously is the first foot in the door.
Mm.
Generally speaking, people will look at all the quality questions and everything else, but at the end of the day, the price has got to be somewhere near the best price. And again, that's very much a moving target, because the quantity of work that's out there fluctuates. Construction's very cyclical. So you've got to move with the market and adjust your profit ask accordingly. And
Yeah,
hopefully when there's a shortage of work, you can get the highest price you can. So yeah, following the market and understanding where the market's going to adjust your profit is quite key. So if you get those two things right, generally you can start to win work that's profitable.
And do you need to be more flexible and adaptable on price? Do you need to be monitoring that more closely than annually, or would?
Oh
Or,
yeah.
yeah.
Every tender. So if
Uh-huh.
you do
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
if you're doing small works, which where a business might only have a time horizon of 3 or 4 weeks in front of them, you're doing 2 or 3 tenders a week, and you
Mm,
can see, am I winning them? Am I losing them? Therefore, I
mm.
need to adjust the profit ask either up or down a little bit,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
try and
Yeah.
anticipate the trajectory of where they're
Mm,
going.
mm.
If prices are going down, you need to bite the bullet and go a little bit harder to win.
Yeah.
Or if they're going up, wait until they top out.
I
Uh,
see.
yeah,
So if you've got those two things right, if you're doing your annual kind of revisitation, and you are on every tender, you're considering the profit ask.
yeah,
How important is then the quality of those submissions? So I remember from that session and the panel really talking about 60 to 80% of any scored evaluation for public sector work was about the quality of the
quality.
submission. So,
Yeah,
so can you talk a little bit about that and what that actually means for an SME tendering?
yeah. The quality questions in public sector work
Mhm.
contribute a percentage of the total mark, and there's a matrix in the document that will tell you how much it is going to contribute and what the weighting is. So understanding that maybe you could take, sort of like say for instance, you could take £500,000 off of the price, and that will cost you, or sorry, you could add £500,000 to the price, and that will cost you a couple of points. Therefore, what you've got to do is you've got to make that up on the quality questions. So you need to answer the quality questions that much better to compensate for your higher price. So when you're looking at the quality questions, there's generally a set of criteria of how they score them with them. And when you read them, to get the top marks, you've got to show, not only how you do it, but what you will innovate, what extra you will bring.
Mm,
And cutting and pasting from a previous document is not going to get you into that top bracket. You've got to
mm.
think of something that's innovative and apply it specifically, very specifically, to the project that you're tendering. So it
Yeah.
takes some thinking about, and there's
Yeah,
you know
and I suppose ideally you would be really using that opportunity to push the buttons of the buyers,
yeah,
looking at their kind of their social value and what's important to them, aligning values as tightly as possible in that quality submission across your knowledge and experience. And aside from your ability to perform, I suppose, really excellent work, demonstrating that you are genuinely aligned on values across the board, I think is going to
that's
put you
right.
in a really strong position, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It was there was a report issued by the CIOB, I think in the last fortnight or so, about social value.
Mm-hmm.
And in that report, one of the tier one contractors, So it'll be music to their ears, literally. If somebody is actually identifying the social value that they're contributing to the project when they're winning. So this applies to main contractors and the subcontractors, and the further tiers down. And so if they can press the right button of what the vision is of the ultimate client, it really does make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a battle of the words, isn't it? And I think that's we're so often working with organizations who actually, when we scratch the surface a little bit, they are actually doing all of these things already, but what they're not perhaps kind of comfortable or adept at is pulling that together and storytelling through it. So I think it's just so important to help businesses get that in those documents to increase the quality of those submissions.
Yeah, there was a business last year I was working with, and they were doing fabrication of the pipe work. A lot of the pipe work they were doing off-site and taking it to site, mainly so that they could do it in a controlled environment, and the quality was better and it speeded everything up. And they weren't actually selling that they were doing effectively off-site manufacturing. Once I said, everybody's screaming out for this in their bid. You've got to cite it. You're doing it already. They just didn't recognise that it was something that people were looking for. So it's knowing what people are looking for and recognising how you're already doing it.
And the value that it brings. Absolutely. So I think just as we wrap up, I just wanted to get your take on the new public sector procurement rules that I think you mentioned we're expecting later in 2024. Is there anything that SMEs should know about at this stage in advance?
I think at this stage it's a little bit early days, but there are procurement changes coming for public sector work. It's not quite clear yet, I don't think, exactly how it's going to work, but the idea is that the public sector will be able to secure work direct from SMEs instead of through, say, framework contractors. And these new procurement rules that are coming out are hopefully going to cascade the work down to the next tier, so that they get the opportunity to bid it. So again, this is about environmental scanning, what's going on in the markets, something to look out for, because if somebody's not already doing public sector work because they think, it ultimately means I'm going to work for another framework contractor, they may well see these changes come out and say, that's now changed. I'll be working direct for the client. That's great. I'll have a look at this. So it's something to be aware of and look out for.
Absolutely. And I suppose prepare to up your game in terms of how you communicate with that main contractor, because it will be a direct conversation that you're having, and all that value we've just been talking about, you're going to have to really sell it.
You have to go do it yourself, and there's people out there that can help with that sort of thing. I'm sure it's the sort of thing that you do, looking at choosing the words.
Relish it, absolutely relish it. Well, listen, that's so great, Peter, and I know that you're going to be down at the South East Construction Expo on the 1st of May at Sandown Park. I think you're holding a session, aren't you?
Yes, that's right. It's a panel session looking at we're actually going to be talking about the new procurement rules that we know of by then, because hopefully there'll be some indication in May as to what's happening. So
Brilliant. Well, thanks so much for joining me today. It's good to talk to you.
Thanks very much. Cheers then, Gia.